Hi, it's Kevin. Welcome to Relationship Ready. Thanks for coming. If you like what we're talking about, please subscribe, share, comment. If you don't like what we're talking about, please share, subscribe, and comment, because we want to have this be a Discord and working together to be able to make all of us a little bit better, a little bit more relationship ready. So today, we're going to talk about something subtle and something blatant. We're going to talk about subtle misogyny. We're going to define misogyny. We're going to define subtle. And we're going to talk about how we're all affected by it and what our role is in it to be able to figure out how to create change, how to build relationships within it, own our own parts, as well as don't get in the way of other people growing. So, what is misogyny? Misogyny is looking down, dismissing, or devaluing that which is defined as female of women. And what is subtle? Subtle is the delicate art, the delicacy of having a hard time describing what it is that's an act or behavior. It's the nuance. It's the flow into it. It's the surprise when you're like, did that just happen to me? Was that uncomfortable? Or was that great? But where did that come from? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how that plays out. For instance, I am doing subtle misogyny right now because I am describing, as a white man, I'm describing misogyny. And I'm describing it so I can give details on it and explaining it together with you, but from me, from my perspective, from my knowledge, from my experience, from my research. And so the subtle misogyny is I'm mansplaining misogyny as a man. Why am I doing that? Well, to educate those who will hear me, and for those who are like, I know this stuff, for them to go, I already said it. I'm not the first person that said it. I'm not the last person that says it. I'm not the most affected by it, but we are all affected by it. And it is my responsibility, as well as everyone's responsibility, to be able to be aware of it, to be able to help change it, and to be able to get out of the way so that people can grow and relationships can grow. So misogyny happens in relationships consistently. Speaking over each other, especially with a position of power. The misogyny is in the power, not in the gender. Because gender is an entire continuum. So the misogyny is in the power. And the subtle is anyone more powerful speaking over someone less powerful. And that speaks down to them. It's in the look. You know, if you're in a meeting, if you're in a room, if you're in a conference, if you are in an audience, if you're in a family, and a question is asked, it's the subtleness that many of those people will look to the person in power, generally to the male, the older male, the white male, to answer first, to take on the task, to defer to, as the man in that position of power is on the pedestal. Whether they know what they're talking about or not, it's that subtle look. It's that subtle pause to see what they have to say first. In decision making, in the gender-specific roles of care, of nurturing, of support, of taking care of healing initially, That subtle look many times goes to women. That's also misogyny, because that's looking for certain roles and expecting that men can make decisions and women can nurture. Because all genders can do both. The person who cares can choose to do that. But we're trained in a systemic way, which is where the subtle comes from. Because we're all part of the system of misogyny and of gender roles and of sexism and racism. We're all part of that system. So in that system, everybody says, I'm not misogynistic, I'm not a racist, I'm not looking down on people to assert my power, I'm not looking to oppress people. And individually, most of us are not. Most of us generally think of themselves as good people who intend to do the right thing. The subtle is the systemic results of what we learn. It's not our fault. It is our responsibility. It becomes our responsibility as soon as we are aware of it, even before we're aware of it, but we don't know it yet. As soon as we know it, it becomes our responsibility to move forward, to speak in a much more direct, less subtle way, to change the way in which we speak, the way we interact, to not talk down at people, but to join with and communicate with our partners, our people, our families, our people of different genders and races than us. And all those subtle systemic forces are what make it so much more difficult, but also more important to be able to recognize the subtleness of it, the secrecy of it. So we need to be aware of the social context and social contract that men have been put in power and put themselves in power. And in order to do so, men in our Western culture need to agree that it's okay to not be in power. Because power over someone is not true power. True power is power over ourselves. And when we are powerful people, we don't need to look down, to oppress, to be misogynistic, to take over. Because we have enough power within ourselves that people look to us to be able to build up, support, make decisions, and nurture. That's where true power is, which is kind of the opposite of misogyny, which is kind of the opposite of subtle misogyny, is being directly powerful and confident in our own skills and in our own limits. And if we recognize those and communicate those with our partner, communicate those with our families, communicate those with our friends, then it's so much easier to build people up because we're not on the defensive. We're only talking about ourselves. We're not accusing, changing, explaining, mansplaining to others. And that's important. So, how do we become this way? Well, first recognize the guilt, because we are all guilty of subtle misogyny. But guilt is not shame. Shame is I am a bad person. Guilt is I did something wrong. And when you recognize you did something wrong, you do what you need to correct it. You change your behavior. You make amends, if possible. You move forward, and you do it differently next time. Use that guilt as a motivator. Use that awareness as a motivator. Because when you're unaware, you don't know what to change. When you're aware, you get to practice making change effectively. In however you're changing your relationship, however you're changing your language, however you're changing your communication, however you're changing your place that you come from. Because if you come from a place of love of yourself and others, it is very difficult to come from a place of power over others. So, we need to create a lens of power within ourselves to look through, to be able to see where we stand and how we can build ourselves up and others up at the same time. It's vital to be able to do that directly, clearly, and not subtly. That's where power comes from. That's where clear communication comes from. So examine your day, your week, your meetings, your interactions, your communication with your partner, and look at the places that you are affected by the systemic, subtle misogyny. It might be in a look, it might be in a roll of the eyes, it might be in an uncomfortable feeling, or maybe a powerful feeling that you're like, why do I feel powerful in this situation? Well, it might have been what you were trained on. And what do you do with that? You recognize that there is masculine and feminine in all of us. And misogyny is not masculinity. Misogyny is not power. Masculinity is power. Femininity is power over ourselves. And the more we own that and treat ourselves with respect, the more we can treat others with the respect that we deserve and that we can give to others. So, it's hard to explain subtle misogyny because it's subtle. It's difficult to find the descriptive words of it. But once you know it, you see it everywhere because you have awareness. You see it in yourselves, you see it in others, you see it in interactions, you see it in your partner. It's not helpful to point it all out to your partner without consent, because misogyny does not have consent. It's power over, it's burrowing through, it's bowling over, it's knocking down their walls. You don't want to knock down your partner's walls. You want to recognize their walls and point them out to yourself to become aware. And then when your partner brings them up, to recognize and acknowledge and support them and compliment them for being able to point them out themselves. And then asking consent if you can support them in taking down their walls, being vulnerable enough together with you to be able to build them up in a more healthy way. So what did we talk about today? We talked about definition of subtle, the definition of misogyny. When you put those together, how we act as subtle misogynists. We're all victims. We're all perpetrators. We are all responsible for becoming aware and building healthier relationships based on true power, the power of ourselves in the masculine and feminine, and true power to be able to own ourselves, own our behaviors, own our feelings, and be able to be open to our partners. So that when you mix those together, you create a much more healing and building up and stronger force together. So make a contract with yourself that you're going to explore your assumptions, explore the norms that you've been trained, lived in, experienced, and see if you're willing to look at them from a different perspective and to grow in your communication, in your support, to build up others and build up yourself instead of buying in to the subtle misogyny that affects all of us. So we can all be more relationship ready. Thanks for watching.